Hey, hey, can you hear me now? Hear me now. Someone answer.
All right,
Yeah.
looks good.
Welcome back, everyone, to another show we like to call the GM Happy Hour. I'm Allard here from the Dice Crisis podcast, where we're at right now, providing this visual entertainment for you live. I'm sitting here with Adam from Southern Tomfoolery, Griff from Hideous Laughter, and Tyler from MinMaxed. Today, we are going to talk about adapting your adventure path to your table. Now, we all are playing and publishing adventure paths out to all you, and there's something to be said about trying to like follow the story as written as best it can, but that's not always the case when you see how your party or your players are reacting and their ideas on how they want to progress the story. So we're just going to talk about like when and how we think how and when we think uh, adapting your adventure path is a good idea,
And why?
yeah, and why.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Starting it off, when do we think we is a good idea to change an adventure path? And I'm gonna go with mine off the bat. It's like I like to do it when I see that my players are going to go about an encounter or a situation that I've presented to them in a completely different way than I expected them to. And I don't know, do we want to give examples from the show or keep things as vague as possible from that standpoint?
I think we can give some examples.
I was gonna say you can not spoil what you're doing with some vague
yeah.
examples, right?
Yeah, I think, no major spoilers here. Some maybe potentially very minor spoilers, but nothing that's going to ruin your experience of the shows. I think we'll be able to talk about that fairly safely.
Yeah, okay. So my big example is in my game I run a 3-person party. And since most adventure paths and stuff are tuned to 4-ish, 4 to 5-ish, is it just usually straight 4?
They say
Four.
4, but 4 to 5 is kind of
Yeah,
what
so
expected, I guess.
I have a little bit of adjusting that I kind of need to think about in pretty much every encounter that I come across. And I mean, the one of the best ways that I've found to easily do it is to let my players use NPCs at their discretion, I guess. What about you guys? Or is
You
anything
did say
like
when.
that?
You said when you should adjust your adventure
He said
path.
when, why, and how. So that's so
Get a
I-
couple of the W's and
yeah,
an H.
and an H.
Any question of adapting your adventure path?
Well, when I say immediately,
Yeah.
immediately start
Right up front.
changing it
Well,
right away.
You know, it's funny. I think Adam and I were talking about this the other day in the STFU episode we did about how early on you started adapting Aeon Throne because of how little information you got about the tie-in NPC.
Well, yeah, if any of you have ever read an AP, you know, and for those of you that don't, here's how adventure hooks are written in APs, particularly Starfinder APs, because they have a smaller page count. Here's 2 paragraphs of how your characters are related to this AP. And with Aeon Throne as an example, it's like your players should know Sedona for some reason. That's pretty much the adventure hook as written. They should just know her, and that's not enough. So to Griffin's point, when it was immediately from page 1, it's like, okay, well, there's got to be something that ties it in more so than just they know her, and so that's a start, right? And then you go from there.
Yeah, I guess as soon as you have kind of because they only have so many words that they can use to fill out these adventure paths. They're restricted, so they have to kind of minimize the details that they give you. So it does kind of upfront give you a lot of leeway to adjust things how you see fit, just straight up going in.
I'd say every written adventure path you could probably put on a scale of 1 to 10 on how good that initial hook is. And the ones that are up in that 8 or 9, you don't have to touch it usually, but some of them, I'll use some of the ones. I don't know, one of the 8 that start with a generic festival.
Right.
You might have to punch that up a little bit.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It gets old. So at the beginning,
Yeah,
you get your backstories we talked about in session 0, and I think many of the GMs that run adventure paths read ahead, and then you start to see, okay, well, how might I suit even this intro and further in? How might I suit this to this group of individuals or to my player's playstyle? And if your players really like stuff like investigation and you have that in your adventure, you might lean into it heavier than you would for a different party. So I think you got to be thinking about that from the beginning, because you want to set up the threads early on for important stuff. And I think especially, so I'll use my adventure, Carrying Crown, the one I'm running for my podcast, as an example. I was warned going in that the books are pretty disjointed. So I was already thinking ahead of time, how am I going to change that so that it feels like the same adventure? It feels very seamless between the books, when in actuality it isn't. There's also stuff like, hey, in book 6, the writers acknowledged that they didn't introduce the main thread of the campaign until book 6. They're like, you should think about doing that earlier. Well, yes, if you read all of the books, you know that. If you played it book by book, you probably didn't get that opportunity.
So
but
Griffin,
that's another big thing that I would say you should know and start changing right away.
So Griffin, do you think that speaks to an importance of having all of the books of a campaign before starting?
I think if there's no time pressure to start, and under perfect circumstances, yes, you should have all of the books and at least skim them. I mean, usually book 1 gives you here's the outline of the rest of the adventure, but I'll use this as an example. I like to introduce NPCs before maybe they're introduced in the book. And in order to do that, you need to know the NPCs. You need to actually know the book NPCs to do that. And you need to know their personalities, and you need to know their later motives. And in order to do that, you have to have read the other stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, if in our case, we're running a series of 3 book in adventure paths, 3 different adventure paths. However, I want them to feel like one story, right? And so before we started Aeon Throne, I had read all of Aeon Throne and Signal of Screams. And so I was able throughout Aeon Throne to seed some of that in there and adapt both of those APs to the table that was playing them. You know what I mean? The reason that comes to my mind is because you're talking about introducing NPCs earlier. Well, Josh's character, I introduced an NPC from Signal of Screams into his backstory. You know what I mean? So there wasn't any relevance within Aeon Throne, but there's a relevance to it in Signal of Screams, and we get to get some pieces of information about this character before he even becomes introduced in the adventure itself.
I think it's something important to note, especially if you're tuning in because you want to run Paizo APs, that Paizo APs are almost entirely written by freelance writers, and they get an outline of what should be in the story, but they're not writing book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're writing book 2, and they're trying to do their damnedest to make book 2 a cool story, but they don't have book 3 in front of them to link to it, even though they have the skeleton of it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think when you can, if you want to change up an AP from what's written, which most times you will want to do to tailor it to your party, you should have all of the books and at least an understanding of what happens and what the major NPCs are.
And I think you made a really good point where their Paizo APs are written by different authors. You have a producer who's overseeing the entire adventure path, like for Extinction Curse, Ron Lundeen is the producer that oversees book 1 to 6, and he has threads that he ties it to, story wise through book 1 to 6. But you've got different authors with different styles and different influences and things like that all happen, throughout their own books. But it's, I think, to go to what you said, Griff, you start right away because you really need to know that you as the GM will be the one that ties these threads together. That's just how Paizo Adventures generally work. They'll have, loose story hooks, handout 1-1 or handout 1-2 that send you to the next major location that you need to go to. That's one of the big things that I personally have complaints about when it comes to Paizo APs. Most of the time, what takes you from point A to point B is a handout.
Right.
And that's it.
Oh, here's the...
I think that's a good thing to just like keep in mind, that it's always worth changing or juicing up is how to get your players into the next hook. Because they're there to play a game, and they know that they want to progress in the game, and they're smart enough to see when they're getting hooked into something else. But you want to try to like do something different and actually like catch their attention instead of just like wave the flag over.
I think the goal is for them not to know that you're hooking them into the next adventure, right? Like that's the ultimate like thing that you're trying to do. Now, sometimes it's very obvious that you're like, okay, here's the thing that you have to do or else we don't have an AP, but we've kind of covered that in session 0. But yeah, Allard, that's exactly right, is that you want to embellish those in such a way that it doesn't feel like a quest giver. Right.
I think an interesting way to do that is to provide multiple incentives rather than just the adventure hook as written, the handout or whatever. Multiple reasons why the players might end up at the same place. Multiple plot threads that maybe gets your whole table invested in following it, even if it's like, well, I don't really care about what this piece is, what this handout said, but I care about this part from my backstory that happens to take place over there as well. So 2 birds, 1 stone, I'm going to follow this adventure hook. I think that's a powerful tool to use at a table that's just, your session 0 wasn't as locked up tight and not everybody has the same investment in that exact adventure. Well, you can use that kind of a hook where it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. But Allard, you did ask why we would do this.
Yeah, why?
I think this is for the GMs that run published Adventure Pass. This is what's fun. This is the fun part of it.
Yeah.
It's making it your own story is fun. It's so much fun to listen to people like talk about the 30 different groups that played Rise of the Rune Lords and how each table approached things differently, or how each GM ran something with their own little spin on it. And that's what's cool about GMing a written adventure path is not necessarily going off book, but putting your personal touches on the book that makes it unique.
Oh, one of my favorite things to do is to hear how other tables play adventure paths or modules that I've either played myself or that I've listened to. It's so interesting to hear how different tables overcome similar challenges and how they got to those points. That's tons of fun.
And it's really fun when you are playing and you realize, oh my God, we just did something crazy that nobody has done it this way before.
Yeah.
I don't think those feelings are as rare as you would think it is, just because of how diverse everybody is when they come down and sit at a table together.
In fact, I'd venture to guess that every party running through every AP has at least one thing in their AP that they're like, I'm pretty sure nobody's ever done that.
Absolutely.
Nobody did it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, the why, it goes into a lot of the reason why the STF table and the players that sit there, of what we want out of a game. Like I know that all of my players as people want actual personal investment in the story. None of them are interested in going through a list of check boxes. You know what I mean? Like it isn't like a rush to complete the campaign or win the campaign or anything like that. They're expecting a story, you know, and that they're the main characters in the story. And so, you know, adventure paths are written without protagonist. That's the whole thing. It's everything to a story but the protagonist.
Yeah.
And your players are the protagonists. And so if you're not taking who your players are as characters and the characters that they've brought to the table and making them more than just participants in a world, rather than this story is kind of about them, you know, and that there's a reason why they're involved. I know for my table, there would be a lot of disappointment there. You know what I mean? And that's just been how we've run our games since we've started playing, is that we're all avid readers and kind of literary folks, and we love stories. And that is the most like appealing part of tabletop role-playing games versus video games, right?
Yeah.
Is that we're in a story and we're telling a story together. And I want my player character and my voice to be part of that story, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of those things where, you know, when you're talking about, you know, a protagonist, and depending on what kind of game you're running, your typical hero's journey, one question I actually have for everybody at the table here is, when you're running your players through these games, it sometimes becomes about one of those players being the protagonist and some of the other players being the co-stars to that protagonist. Is that something that you found has happened at your table? And do you get any sort of pushback from your players from that sort of thing, like the co-star who wants to be the star, or maybe two of them are vying for that, you know, main protagonist role? How do you incorporate that into how you change an AP? Because one thing that's a responsibility for us as GMs is to make it fun for everybody at the table. Mm-hmm. And if you've got multiple people who want to be that main protagonist and they kind of fight each other on it, you have to be able to satisfy them both to a certain extent.
I would say that it goes beyond the people that are actively trying to be the protagonist. And our responsibility as GMs is drawing out to those that are not voicing, you know, that are basically deferring to the more outward personalities at the table, right? And to answer your question, I think that probably happens at every table.
Yeah.
Because of general table dynamics. You're going to have some personalities that are more comfortable and like driven to be involved, and they're really comfortable speaking and being in character and RPing, and it's not, I don't think oftentimes it's like a choice to try to like hog the spotlight. It's just, hey, I'm naturally this way as a person, and so my character is going to I'm going to be speaking more because I'm not I'm confident or overly confident or whatever the case may be. I think that's a natural dynamic that develops. And to your point, Tyler, it's the GM's responsibility to kind of massage that a bit, make sure that that player is, you're rewarding that player for being invested because you want that.
Right.
But you also have to look and see those that you know have something to add to it, but aren't going to fight for the space.
That whole table.
And you create the space for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
I've definitely, like, with my table dynamics, I definitely know that there's people that want to kind of, they know parts of their character that they want to go like out into the world and explore with, and others that don't have as much experience just kind of like exploring what their character is. And I think a good way to help those people out is to show them a little something about like the type of character that they've chosen that they might not have thought about. And I think it's easier to do that for like a cleric or like an inquisitor or a godly person, because you can just kind of like reach down and like start in with their god and like get them invested in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you also have to look out for the moves that the people are intentionally making, and maybe you can glean a little bit of light in what they're going for, and something that isn't necessarily a reaction in that moment, but something that you can react to later on in order to like, oh, in order to get that person to be like, oh, my action did have an effect, and I can change things by maybe not even kind of realizing it. Or what happens if I do try to change something? What'll happen then? Getting people kind of curious about what they can do in the situations.
Yeah, when players come into my when new characters come into my games, I like to have a when I'm thinking about what I would change about an AP, it's constantly changing because constantly we're having new characters come in and out, and not every character, in my opinion, needs an arc. Not every character needs a hero's journey, but every character needs a payoff. There has to be some kind of payoff. And so what I ask is, what is the payoff for your character? What is the payoff condition? What is something that could happen that would be so satisfying for this character that it would fulfill one of their basest desires, one of their biggest needs? And so maybe it's not a character arc. We've had a character arc on our show, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be one moment, one thing that if this happens in the course of the story, my character and myself are gonna feel fulfilled with what has happened with the character. Maybe that doesn't require the character to change, but it certainly requires me to adjust the story, to adjust something in the future that will act as a payoff for that character. And so I think that's really important when you're talking about changing things. As a player, people want to have that kind of payoff. It's a character moment, but it's like the biggest character moment you can have. You sprinkle in all these little character moments throughout the story, but when you have this payoff for your character, it may not seem like the biggest thing to everyone else at the table, but it can be the biggest thing to that player or to that player's character. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as you're adjusting your story, is how can I incorporate these things and how can I make this work?
Gotcha. And to that point, do you try to talk to your players about what they think their characters' payoffs might be, or what do you do when a player doesn't necessarily know what their character payoff is going to be? Or
So
That's a good
I go
question.
2 ways with that. And the first is, if at the beginning, when you're introducing a character, you feel like, my character's out for revenge. My character's like, those are big payoff things that some people incorporate into their backstory. And that's okay. That's more of a session 0 type thing that I need to know about for the future. But I think something we talked about that's very important, not only for how to run your table and what expectations you set, but also for how you're going to change the story, is these check-ins in the mind of your table's characters, because characters do change, and it's not always a hero's journey. It's not always a character arc in the right direction, but characters change and players' perceptions of their own characters change. And with that in mind, if you're doing check-ins, that light bulb might happen 40 sessions in, like, oh my God, like this whole time my character's been fighting for X, or like trying to get like to be validated in this way. Okay, well, now I can take that and I can run with it. And it's okay if that happens later in the campaign, but it's something that is a huge character moment. The aha is a huge character moment as well. So if you can do that in character, that's really cool too.
I think something to pull it back to the topic, right, is that adapting an AP is an ongoing evolution.
Yeah.
It doesn't just start and end with the GM. Okay. And the GM is going to have we all have our mechanizations and the things that we want to do to make this AP our own, but it doesn't stop there. Those check-ins are so valuable for you to give you like warning signs if you're heading in a direction with this AP that is going to run into a wall. And if you're not checking in with your players and the characters, right? So as 2 different check-ins, check in with your players, maybe in between sessions, check in with characters during sessions, and get an idea like, okay, am I steering this in the right direction? Because they just told me a bunch of stuff that sounds like they don't want to be right where I'm directing them to, and I need to make some adjustments, whether that's the AP as written or what you've done to change it. You might need to second guess and be like, maybe I need to course correct.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think this might be a hot take, but sometimes I think that players don't know what they actually want out of a game.
Player call out.
I think that they have some very clear expectations of what they want for their character out of a game, but I think oftentimes it's the GM's responsibility to make sure that the game is rewarding, and part of that is, as we've talked about before, keeping stakes involved and keeping your players guessing. But you need to know if you're heading towards a cliff that will like shut down your whole table.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I don't necessarily disagree with you on that, Adam. I completely agree. And we've drawn so many lines back to our session 0 conversation already. And a lot of it's about understanding your table, understanding your players, what they want out of their characters, understanding how your players have written their characters, or even not at all written their characters, right? I mean, some people come to the table with literally no backstory for you to work with, and all you have is how they act within the game itself. And it's very, very certainly a fluid thing that you have to make course adjustments all the time. But I mean, those big payoffs are really important. One thing I really like incorporating into my games that nobody's mentioned yet are the downfalls before the big payoffs. And a lot of times that is something that gets built into the APs. You are given resources, you are given tools to be able to facilitate those, potential downfalls. But, being able to give a player's character the lowest, like make them consider what their players would do or what their characters would do when they're at their lowest, is when I get some of the best role play out of my players. Right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we've talked a lot about changing the AP for your players. So I'll throw another hot take out there. You're supposed to have fun. Change it however the fuck you want that makes it fun for you.
Yeah.
You're the GM.
Yeah.
You are the law when it comes to this adventure. And if you want to take them on a pirate adventure 3 books in, do it. Do it.
This is my AP now.
That's fun for you. That's fun for you.
So, yeah, a reminder to all the GMs out there: you are also a player at the table.
Yeah,
yes, there's a lot of responsibility to the other players at the table that you have as a GM, but don't forget that if it's not fun for you, it's not going to be fun for your players. I can guarantee you that as soon as you stop having fun GMing the adventure will suffer, and the players will feel it one way or the other.
And I had to call that out because we're so fucking ho-hum about like changing things for your players and doing this and doing that. And I agree with all of it. Don't get me wrong, but God, it makes it seem like we don't like GMing. God, it makes it seem like this is such a like big daunting task. It's not. It's not a huge daunting task. It's responsibility, but like you're supposed to have fun. Yeah. The good thing is, if you're the GM, you've usually picked an adventure that is interesting to you first. Right. Yep. And so, the things that happen in the adventure, you don't usually have to change too much to suit you having fun.
Right.
But yeah, I just want to put that on the table because boys, we better be having fun.
Yeah. No, and you know what? I think it depends on. I mean, yeah, of course we have fun, but what do we get out of that? How do we derive fun from our tables? And boy, that's I'm gonna almost reject or pull back that question out of the gate because that sounds like a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother GM happy.
Yeah.
How do you have fun?
Yeah. But you're right.
Drinking mostly.
But you're right. It is absolutely something that should be taken into consideration. It's
what
your
about
table.
This question, as GMs, what is something that you have like an encounter that you have changed that made it a whole lot more fun for you to GM it, and like what was that change that made it?
Oh Lord!
Oh my god, baby! Fucking environmental hazards in as
Yeah.
many things as you can do. It makes it so much more dynamic and fun. And I've only gotten positive feedback from my players for making those changes.
No,
Mhm.
same.
So
That's it.
100%, it's like I'm running 5 things on the board. Let's make it another level of difficult and add water and flying things and boat mechanics. Let's
Maybe
do
have
it because like
aliens in there.
that shit's fun. That's a good time. It's fun to explore the limits of the rule system and
Well-
not necessarily break them, but like, wow, there's a rule for this. We just looked this up. Like, oh, there's a different rule for this. Oh, this is how we could interpret this. It's fun. It's
Yeah,
it's
I've
testing the
recently-
boundaries.
I've recently started thinking about combats as puzzles. You know what I mean? Like there should be like puzzles to figure out with combats.
Oh, they
you know,
are.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, well, but like they can easily devolve into swing, hit, stay, swing, hit, stay, swing, hit, stay. You know, like, and I think 2E. You know, before you even say anything,
All right.
Tyler,
All right. I see you
I think
calling me.
2A
GM call
2E
out.
has made some strides towards fixing that with each
Yeah.
monster having a special unique ability that you have to like figure out and solve for that, you know. But
Well, now it's swing, talk shit, move away.
Yeah,
Right,
full,
right,
full,
right,
full
right.
disclosure, I've had to work much less hard on making combats puzzles ever since I started playing 2E because they're writing the combats to be puzzles.
Yeah,
see-
absolutely.
swing twice and then avoid dying 3.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, like I you know, it was interesting because throughout Aeon Throne, you're mostly fighting humans and soldiers, right? That's the theme of the adventure is you're fighting, you know, the Empire, if you will. And as we've gotten into Signal of Screams, there's a much more diverse like cast of encounters, you know, and each of them have different specific conditions that you have to deal with, you know, and the environmental factors and all those types of things are like really add, as you said, Griffin, it adds a whole different layer of dynamic to make it feel unique, you know, like this is a memorable fight because I had to dodge out of that daze effect, or I had to make sure I was standing in the right spot so I didn't get blasted by a lava geyser or whatever the case may be. You know, it ties into the puzzle thing more than just brute force. And for me, that's fun as a GM, and I think it's fun for players too. You know,
I think one big thing in adventure paths that often comes up is resource draining encounters, which I understand the necessity of. But I think it makes it much more interesting where you can, as you're changing the encounter up to, if you're going to have resource draining encounters, at least vary them and make them different. So it's
Mhm.
not, I'll give an example from my book. Like there's a whole fucking lot of werewolf combats that I took out of a certain book we just did.
a
And
certain
replaced
book
them.
we just did. Wait,
certain book
hold
we
on.
just
I'm
did.
not sure which one you're talking about.
And replace them with more interesting stuff. So either beefed up 3 of the encounters with different stat blocks, or made a certain encounter harder, or put other resource drains in there. And I think that's something that you should really consider. Even if the story of an AP is all good for you, that's something you should consider changing at your table. Is some of the encounters add some variety, or use the lovely percentile tables they put in the back of the book, because oftentimes you have 10 creatures unique to that book in the bestiary in the back, and sometimes the books don't use them.
Yeah,
Use
I
them. They're
find
cool.
that absolutely astonishing. That becomes back to the issue of not only do freelance writers write the APs, but different freelance writers write different sections of those same
Right.
APs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I really like to do with APs is when you get to a moment, like I like to review where my parties come from at the end of each book, and then look at the next book from their perspective. And I know you should be trying to do that as like preparation is concerned. You should be saying, okay, how are my players going to perceive this particular thing that I have for them? But I like taking full encounters out of the next book and inserting something that is specific for individual players. I don't have anything out on radio that does this right now. I have something really big coming up soon in my book 2. That is that I have completely removed sections of book 2 to insert my own encounters that I've put in that specifically match for different player storylines that have been developing throughout the whole adventure. And I think that's something that you should not be afraid to do. Right. But like Griff said, some of these encounters are either resource drainers or they're fillers. They're filler encounters. Here's this, fun monster that we wanted to throw in because the author likes it or whatever. Don't feel bad to take that sort of shit out and insert something that is relevant to your players, their characters, and whatever backstories they have.
There you go. And I think on that idea, almost always, at least in the books that I have, there's a set piece encounter at the very end, where it's like kind of like a side quest. Is that in your guys' APs? I haven't read too many of them, so I assume that they're in all of them.
A side quest.
Well, okay, so
Encounter.
boy, you're running an AP that
is
old Paizo, right?
I was like, hold up.
I was like, okay,
Hold up.
as I was saying it, I was like, maybe other ones.
Maybe they don't have that.
Well, and Paizo stepped away from that for a lot of reasons, because I think word count is one of them, but I think the second thing is giving that power to the GMs. As opposed to having them look at that side quest and go, oh, I have to incorporate this somehow, right?
Yeah. So for me, I've had those examples of side quests, and I haven't used them as written at all. I've only taken them as like the location or something that they have mapped out, and then skin it to make it relevant for my players and what they're coming across.
Yeah, I mean,
Or I leave them out.
yeah, well, they're inspiration, right? Like they give you something to do, and I think that kind of all ties back to what Tyler's saying, is that as a GM, you can't be afraid to edit what's presented, because it's presented as a inspiration more so than hard fact. Like, you know what I mean? These APs, particularly with like the sidebar stuff, are there just to get your brain going, and there have been whole encounters that I've replaced with NPCs that matter to the PCs. There have been whole encounters that I've just cut out completely because they're fluff. And I'm doing one way that I've adapted to the table is that we do milestone leveling. So we're not chasing XP. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to have an encounter in there that's just taking up time and space with no real purpose to it. Like I'm not afraid to cut that out completely of an AP and not add anything in its place, like it doesn't need it, but then there are other things that's like, okay, well, this is a cool idea, but I can flavor this differently or change some aspects of it that ties into a story that's already been set up and established with the 80 plus hours that we've already played, and I don't know, just not being afraid of deviating is, I think, the key part to what we're talking about here, of why and how you would adapt an AP. Like, you just do it. Like, don't feel like you're confined to the specific parameters. I mean, Tyler, I know you've interviewed some writers, we've interviewed some writers, and it's something consistent that I hear across the board when we talk to the writers of these campaigns is that they're thrilled when a group takes what they put out and changes it and makes it their own story. Every single writer that I've talked to is like, that's the goal. That's our point. That's our point. And so it's really solid,
Yeah. So I think this whole, with that kind of information and what we've kind of talked about, it seems like you should always adapt your adventure paths, and there isn't really a reason why. Well, is there a reason why you shouldn't adapt an adventure path for your table?
That's almost a better question, isn't it?
Yes, there is. and it's continuity.
Ooh, there you go.
And this can happen if you don't keep a rein on what you do adapt. You can create continuity issues in the story, and if they're glaring enough, the players are gonna catch on. The one thing that is usually pretty solid, I won't say all the time, but is usually pretty decently solid in Paizo APs is the continuity. And so every time you make a change, you're adjusting that continuity. If you're taking great notes and stuff, you're golden. Change it all the time. Change it whenever you want. But I've definitely had circumstances where I fucking throw something in, throw a wrench in off the rip. And I really have to go back and be like, okay, that's going to change these other 5 things I have in the future. So I gotta know that. So that's just something to be cautious of. Again, I'm not clearly not advocating not changing APs to suit your table, but that's something you need to be careful of when you do.
Can I get the original question again?
When shouldn't you change your AP?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Griff. Like, you got to be mindful of the ripple effect of any changes you make.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, worship Desna, or you're going to get the butterfly effect.
Oh, Desna. No, I think for me, the only times that I would go by the book is when I'm teaching a new table the rules. And that's only because I'm focusing on the rules and I'm not focusing on story deviations. I still want to make every moment within the story fun and make it big and seem, like they have an effect on the story. But a lot of that can be built in within the APs themselves. Some of them are written really well to be able to do that and accommodate for your typical player actions or choices. There have been a couple of times where I've, for example, just run book 1 of Rise of the Runelords with a party and just strictly gone by the book because I'm teaching them the rules and that's what we're doing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But again, I don't think that's necessarily what we're talking about. I think what we're talking about is a table and telling a story.
Yeah, well, I think even what you're talking about is a form of adapting the AP to the table. If you're doing it from a teaching perspective, you're going to be a lot more, you're going to have a lot more clarity about what the actual encounter is, what's happening. You're going to be like, okay, well, this person is doing this and this is why and how they're able to do it. Right, because you're trying to help them learn strategies and how to defend against some of these things. Like,
sure,
all right, this guy's putting staggered on you. This is how he's doing it, and what you can do to counter that. And so even then, you're adapting the AP to the players at the table
and being more transparent. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
it even expands past adapting your AP for the table and adapting your GM style for the table as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's all about just being able to focus in on what brings you all together at this table the most amount of fun in the story that you're trying to tell together.
You got to be ready to improvise.
Right.
Improvise.
Have fun. Don't worry about it all that much, but just know what makes a good story, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Before we go to our break, let's talk a little bit about some of the most significant changes that we've made for the APs that we're running. I think we can do that without a whole lot of spoilers.
For the APs we're currently running on our podcast right now.
Yeah.
I'll go first because I've made significant changes to book 2, but none of them have aired yet.
Okay.
And just like I mentioned how I've removed entire encounters, entire NPC groupings to accommodate a player's story, I have done that in book 2, but I'm not really to talk about it in depth. I like to play book 1s of APs pretty much as they're written. Book 1s are laying the groundwork, and I don't want players to be confused about the groundwork that I'm laying out. Depending on who wrote book 1 too. Like Jason Tondro wrote book 1 for Extinction Curse for us, and he laid phenomenal groundwork for me going through to book 6. Whereas I've played some book 1s, either been GM'd them or ran through them, where book 1 was kind of just a total mess, and I would be fine with adjusting it. But if you look at the synopsis of the adventure 1 to 6, and book 1 lays a solid foundation, I personally like keeping book 1 without much adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't done much in my pod yet.
Yeah, and that's definitely important. If that first book is good at like laying the tone of what the kind of plot hook is supposed to be.
Yeah, I didn't change anything in book 1 of Aeon Throne. You know,
It changed a lot.
I
This could
think-
be the story of Hideous Laughter, though.
Oh, well, and I also think that book in particular needs work. You know, it needs the love that you gave it.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, I'll talk. We're in 2 different APs. So for the first one, the main thing that I changed is the dynamics of the MacGuffin of the rune drive. I'll just put that out there of what it is and how it works, you know, because I wanted to tie it together to the whole story that we're telling. And then for Signal of Screams, I changed, there's some like random pirate encounters involved in it. And I changed that to be reflective of one of my character's backstories, to where it's not pirates, it's actually a mercenary group that is there specifically because of this player.
Nice.
Or player character, and then worked that story throughout the entire book 1 of Signal of Screams. Like, took what's just a single pirate encounter that happens at the beginning of the book, changed who it was, and then integrated those characters throughout the rest of book 1. You know, so that to you know.
Oh, I'm fucking made a connection in my brain there, Adam.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's about as how do you say it, Allard? As vague?
As Vag?
Vague?
As vague?
As vague?
Vague?
As
Vague?
vague? As
Vague
vague?
down
That's
there?
about as vague as I can make it.
It's about as vague.
For me, the biggest change that I have done kind of, I think, also wraps into a point of why to change your adventure path to kind of hook all of the books together. My biggest change came at the end of book 1, where I made it impossible for the players to come back to what they had been doing. And I won't go into any more detail on that, but if you need to move your players out of an area into the next zone, there are ways that you can
Destroy the zone.
That's
their
a win.
action, make it hard for them to come back and settle into what they had been comfortable with.
Remember when World of Warcraft had the Cataclysm expansion?
Right. There you go. Yeah.
No, I didn't play it.
I'll get into this a little bit. I mean, book 1, there's supposed to be 2 people at the funeral for Laura Moore. Brought in NPCs from all over the adventure. The entire a player gets like basically a part of their character in book 1, several parts of her character, and you learn a lot more about her through a side quest. I picked an NPC that I particularly love, and I love role playing, and made him a permanent fixture. I took another NPC and brought her into the rest of the book. You know, I took the entire mechanics of the book 1 boss fight and changed them to make it more cinematic. That's how I'm doing this, though. And I think the reason I'm doing it the way I'm doing it with a book 1 is because my adventure is so disjointed, and I need to have these things that are constantly like hooks to other pieces and things that I can carry forward. I need to have that, or it's going to feel like an island, and it's going to feel like, you know, Raven grows where they start. It's going to feel like they never went there.
You know,
It's going to feel like X-Files seasons
Yeah.
Right. Monsters of the week type deal, you know.
Griff, I gotta tell you, as somebody who's played through the majority of Carrion Crown, I really like how you did just that, because it felt, when I read Carrion Crown and then when I played Carrion Crown, it felt like, all right, book 1 is this horror trope and book 2 is this horror trope, and we're just gonna go aimlessly from this trope to the next trope without any, real tie-ins. I really liked how you did that, and I saw that really early on in your pod too. So
Yeah,
I gotta GM call out you for that.
Yeah,
Positively.
I'll take a good GM call.
Yeah,
out.
that's
good GM call out. Yeah.
And like for real though, like the concept of Carrying Crown was AP that I was very interested in. I hadn't read any of it, but as I think is pretty well known at this point, if you're part of the FFSC community, is that all of STF are very fond of Curse of Strahd. And, this was the Pathfinder version of that, and or so I thought. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to have a chance to play this, but I want to listen to it. That's how I discovered Hideous Laughter, right? It's just because I was interested in and so I listened to Griffin and his team doing it, and I'm like, oh, this is fucking great. And so then after they finished book 1, I went and read book 1. And I was like, I remember one of the first private messages that I sent Griffin. I was like, am I missing something in here in the book? Like,
Yep.
Is there a different edition? Is there a different edition of this or what?
I don't see any of this in here.
Who are these guys? What the heck's going on?
Yeah. But for real, you've taken what I now know to be very disparate and formed it into not only just a great cohesive narrative, but there's a whole world that you've created around it. You've basically created your own alternate universe of Ustalov where this shit's all connected.
That's definitely fair, and I think it's kind of the nature of a GM, or at least an experienced GM, in that you're a world builder too, and you like building worlds, and you like. I mean, it tickles me every time I create a continuity between my published story, my podcast story, and something I'm doing in a home game.
Yeah.
It just building the world that way and building a world is one way you can adapt an adventure path to your table. I mean, play the Rune Lords trilogy. They're helping you certainly in that series, but you're building the world with a table of 3 separate tables of epic heroes.
Yeah.
And
I mean, to tie into that, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that don't be afraid to borrow from other APs and bring it into the AP that you're running, and for instance, as y'all know, I'm running Griff and some others through Attack of the Swarm, but that gave me all sorts of inspiration for Signal of Screams, and I can't really talk about it too much, but what I've learned from running and playing Attack of the Swarm, I was able to use in Signal of Screams in a really cool way that I'm not afraid to pull from that, and say this is, and create in those 2 adventures exist in the same world. They have crossover effects to each other,
and Paizo does that themselves. In Return of the Rune Lords, you go into a site under Kaer Maga that is directly after a completely different AP's set of heroes went into and out of that location, right? I mean, even Paizo heavily crosses these things, and it's okay to do that. Now, I mean, that requires, a lot of extra knowledge of the lore, right? And to read into Golarion specifically. But I mean, why wouldn't you? Golarion's an awesome place. I mean, I thought in the early 2000s, when I really started reading up on the Forgotten Realms, I'm like, oh, this place is great. I love it. And then nothing ever left the Sword Coast. And, Golarion does such a good job of just making this big sprawling continent of so many amazing things that happen that are still tied together in the background. Do it. Find it.
Especially if you want to go off the rails, read almost every AP that's ever been written has a campaign setting book. Read
Yeah.
the campaign setting book for ideas. It's great. It's 50 pages on shit that you can homebrew off of endlessly.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, personally, I like that about being a 2E GM, because all of that 1E content that's lore specific, I get to borrow from without any issue at all, because it's still the same world, right? So, I mean, for anybody who's running Golarion, there is so much lore content for Golarion. It's ridiculous.
And is there ever a time you'd like to change that lore to meet your table's purposes?
I have.
Yeah. Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
too. I've definitely been a lot more liberal with Ibra as a deity than as written, because that's what's important to the table, you know.
True that.
You have to ignore certain parts of the lore to even want to play my adventure path. So,
But yeah, that's also true.
It sounds like
Or you can
it's like,
ignore
oh, you read the 2E core rulebook? Well, fuck me then.
or a player call out for HTF. You can ignore all the lore that's presented to you because you know, like, fuck Hylax. Who gives a shit about that bitch? You know what I mean?
Fuck that guy. Seriously.
Oh, man.
Oh man, well I think on that, that's probably the time for another drink.
Yeah, let's get
refresh
drinks.
your
Let's
drink, take a little break.
take a little break and then we'll be back. What do we want to call out the time before we take the break? Do you want to be back at like 9:15 my time, 8:15 your time? Is that enough time? We need
Yeah, it's
15
11
minutes.
minutes.
Works for me.
11 minutes.
I'll take it.
11 minutes.
And we'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. See you guys.
All right.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're in the back half of the GM Happy Hour, and this is where we like to, you know, answer some questions that have popped up throughout the first half and before that even. So, Adam, are you still our master of questions?
I am.
Ooh, what do we have on the docket tonight?
We've got some pretty good ones actually. So Kyle from the Dice Crisis, yeah, you're Kyle. Ask, what do you find to be the most common adaptation that's made? And I'm just going to lead with my answer because I think it's the one is combat encounters.
As like the
most common time you're changing something as written.
Definitely
combat
most
encounter.
frequent. Yeah.
I don't think I haven't changed an encounter probably since like the very first encounter when I realized like this might be just whatever.
This might be tuned to like 4 players, and I've got 3, and one of which is not a fighter at all.
Yeah, one of which just ran away.
Player call out.
Player call out.
Girl, he thought he was I
Fucking
guess.
Eli.
He was saving somebody's life.
I think that's probably the most common across just tables in general at home as well, is just changing combat encounters.
Definitely one that's the most like obvious and apparent thing for you to do because like most of the APs are the written out encounters, are they not? And it's like kind of up to us to figure out how to piece those
Massage
together.
them.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I mean, yes, that's the obvious answer, and I'm going to agree with Adam. That is the most common way to do it. However, what's the most fun change that you can make? I'm going to put a twist.
That's
on
not the
Kyle's.
question, Tyler. But
Oh,
you can
I
answer.
can't do that?
But you can answer. You can answer.
Oh,
but just
okay. I
don't-
guess we're going with most fun. I'll do
Yeah, it's
least
like-
fun.
It's like okay, well, I'm going to answer this question
Well,
instead. 'Cause this is what I want to.
We were talking
But
Your
go
about
for
question
it.
bored me, so now I'm moving on
We
to
were
something I want to answer.
right. We were talking about politicians before during the break. So no, it's combat's the easy answer, and that's what if you're
Well, I think
modifying
it's
an
just-
AP.
Yeah,
it's
I think
an
it
answer.
is just the most common one.
Absolutely,
you
without
know?
a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, players, if you don't know that, that's real truth. Like, you're not really ever playing a combat as written. You know,
Almost never.
Almost,
Almost
never.
never.
Yeah,
Almost.
yeah.
almost never.
I don't
All right.
always add monsters and stuff.
Let's see. I think we've answered a couple of these already. So let's from Bipolar Pop Tart. what are some changes you would suggest for bringing TTRPG players into their first Paizo adventure? Or just players in general. Maybe it's their first TTRPG, but like, what are the changes that you would suggest? We touched on this a little bit, Tyler, but I think let's expound on that. Like, we were talking about adapting to new time players. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, for me, it's being very transparent about NPC and villain motivations, right? Like if somebody gives me a sense motive check, if I'm playing my table of current players, I'm going to give them vague bullshit answers based on what their characters would actually perceive from a situation. But if I'm playing new players through something, I'm going to give them way more information about the motivations of somebody or an NPC within the adventure, because I want them to understand that there are things working behind the scenes. I want them to know that those wheels are turning all the time.
It is a game that you
More
are
going
playing
on
a
for what
game.
you're presenting even at any moment.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. Allard
Oh,
makes a good
this one-
point.
This guy just lied to you straight up. You didn't think that was a thing, did you?
You definitely have to foster before you get a table that's like, I'm going to roll a perception check. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You have to foster that behavior with new players,
Oh, yeah.
certainly. And so, it's like, yes, everybody should be rolling a perception check. Hey, you have an opportunity to roll a sense motive check. Like that's stuff that you probably wouldn't do with a non-new table.
Yeah, if you stand in this square, you'll be flanking, which is a good thing that you should be trying to do. Like those types of expressions of the game, of teaching the rules of the game, are going to change the dynamics of any AP you run. I will say you probably should not run an AP for a brand new player. Like I don't really think that that's a great idea.
Really? That's my go-to, Adam.
No, it's
Full AP.
not. It's not.
I don't like
how
to
you
wrangle them
played
in
with
for
me
that much of a commitment.
as a new 2E player. You came at me with a nice homebrewed little single encounter that I could learn the game with.
That I
Get your
tried
toes wet.
that I tried to like coax friendship out of you with, right?
It was a bribe the whole time.
Well,
Did it
I
work?
mean, of course it
You
did.
got us
Let's
into your
really-
white van. Get over it.
Yeah, we're sitting here talking, drinking together. I think that goes without saying. But
Okay, all right. No, I feel you there. And full disclosure, anybody I've started a new table of new players into an AP, we make it to book one and then it fizzles.
right.
So
because
maybe you're right.
Like, even start with something like Fall of Plaguestone. A small
Don't
module.
start with that. Do not do
Well,
that.
Not that particular.
Not
one.
unless you want people to get frustrated as fuck.
Right.
That's something maybe you should change.
Publisher
all
call
of the
out.
encounters in Fall Plaguestone.
Publisher call out.
Publisher call out.
Bowman call out.
All right, Bowman, the blood ooze is rough, bud.
Sorry, man.
You should just tell us up front that you can't have a mostly martial party and expect them to survive
It
this season.
just ain't gonna happen. Just ain't gonna happen.
Welcome to the Slithering. Try that again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The book we're in right now is written by him, so I'm like wondering how balanced his encounters are in this.
I have a direct answer for you. Directly from Bowman, he finished writing Fall of Plaguestone before the rule set for 2E was solidified.
Okay.
So he didn't not intend for it to be so difficult, but after the 2E rules were solidified, it was fucking hard. So yeah, that's just kind of what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So I like this question. It's another one from BPT. He's got questions. He's always got a lot of questions. You've always got a lot of questions, bipolar.
Not a lot of
Pop-Tart.
answers.
All them questions.
Yeah. But it's all right. Thank you for asking them.
What does
Where is she,
listener call out?
bipolar?
This is I guess, yeah, listener call out. We're just dropping call outs left and right. So at what point does it go from adapting to homebrewing?
Oh, that's a very thin line. And I want to start here.
Yeah, I was gonna say
you
Griff
should.
is
I
Griff
think
is
you
best
should.
for this. yeah.
Adapting has been my gateway drug to homebrewing so hard. I fucking love homebrewing now. Fucking love it. And adapting an AP was my gateway drug to doing so. But I think as long as you're keeping the spirit of the story, you're still playing that story. You're keeping many of the NPCs in the story. You're still playing that story. It's your version of that story. in some respects it's homebrewing, but I mean, would I say that what I'm doing is homebrewing when I change up a huge portion of a book? No, I'm still taking the base elements of the story and putting them in what I'm changing. So I wouldn't say that that's a homebrew. It's just a different take.
Yeah.
Now, when I go in and add an evil interlude, that's homebrew.
Right,
That's
right.
homebrew.
Yeah, for sure.
But by the same token, I'm doing that homebrew because I love the story. I love the story, and I want to like tie in the backstory of the story into it. And because there's no written thing that's here's the background of this story, I'm saying, okay, well, I'll homebrew the background of this and shove it in because I love
what
it.
happens when homebrew and adaptation combine? I mean,
You start a podcast. Guys. You start a podcast.
No, I was
That's
just
what
going to say,
happens.
I mean, this
Yeah.
question was made for Griff, right?
yeah.
Without a doubt.
There's some blurred lines here, okay, guys. I think that's where it's really fun. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of joy flexing the creative muscles within the confines of a pre-written story, because it's like it's baby steps. It's like when you try and get somebody into GMing and you say, okay, well, why don't you run like a society scenario, or why don't you run like a short module? It's like dipping the toe in, and in the same way, changing an AP is dipping the toe into homebrew.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And you still have the whole world of Galarian that you're writing in the confines of for that homebrew, which is kind of cool in its own respect. Like, I'm not fucking, oh, it's 1920 Brooklyn, and we find our players here with somehow with ranger levels and stuff, like, but we're adapting all of the classes as well to fit into my setting. I'm not doing that. I'm still in Galarian, so
Good. A 1920s campaign? Come on.
Yeah. So
yeah, let's get you know, I'm the
GM it for us, Griffin.
I'm a
Got level
bard with the flapper archetype. And what's weird about that?
I am adept at, I don't know, making my own alcohol.
I'm a radio announcer, and it's a
Alchemist.
1920.
That's it. There you go. All right. So, last question from Bippy T.
Finally.
To what extent do you include the players on making the adaptations? That's a great question. by
That's
I like to ask vague questions and then answer them in the moment as I go.
You know,
I think that's going to vary table to
so
table.
so
Yeah.
improv.
Yeah.
Well,
I like to know what they're
improv.
thinking and then improv, I guess.
well, I think that ties a lot into your session 0 and check-ins too, right? I mean, in order to make sure that the players are involved, you need to be asking them active questions about where things are going at the time things are going in that direction. You know, I mean, like for my podcast, in Extinction Curse, the Celestial Menagerie is the evil circus that all of the players, or most of the players, have come from. And, you know, when you start getting to that point, you want to start asking questions, or, you know, hey, what this character did this in the Celestial Menagerie, or this player has this NPC has this role. How did you react to them in the past? And you can kind of use that to help you adapt what's about to come up based on the reactions. You don't have to necessarily directly ask them the question about, hey, I'm looking to adapt this thing. How would your character address it? You have to find the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
And you have to find the right questions to ask because, you know, for us as a podcast, we're trying to reveal things to our listeners. But on the same hand, and might just be my table, I want to reveal things to my party.
I think we all are in agreement.
For sure.
Yeah,
You want to
yeah.
get that genuine, honest reaction. So you want to ask the leading questions that hint at something, but don't necessarily answer what's about to happen. You know what you know what I mean?
I do, and I think that, and I agree with that for the most part. Like, especially if you've adapted something in the present story for them, right? Like that they're going to run into somebody that they know that they're not expecting. You know, you don't necessarily want to rope them in on that and kind of ruin that for them, right? But in the same token, if you have an idea for something that will affect the party
Yeah.
as a whole, but it's like something you really need to like get with a particular player, you need an ally to pull this thing off. Yeah, I think absolutely you get the specific player involved in it if it makes sense to, you know. I mean, listen, I might be GMing this game, but I'm not the only person capable of telling a story in my at my table. And so a lot of them have strengths that I depend on and count on, you know. And I'll do a positive player call out to Zach right now, because I would be lost without him as somebody to bounce ideas off of, and then like also help me rein some of my shit in, you know what I mean? And so like he doesn't know everything, but there are certain things that I'll definitely kind of vaguely run by him just to get a pulse, you know. And I think that's the type of player that you want to have at your table, you know. I think that Steve kind of serves that purpose for you a little bit, Griff.
He certainly does. I will say that I'm in a bit of a unique situation in that I have the players' creations that I am now responsible for in my story.
Mhm.
I have characters that had their own motivations and stuff that are coming into the story as mine, or are coming back into the story in a certain point as something that's controlled by me. And in those circumstances, I'm bouncing almost everything off of the player that created that character, because I don't want to misrepresent their character. But I do want them to have a greater part in the story. So I'm working directly with them to say like, hey, it would be really cool if we brought this character in here. How do you think you would react to that? What do you think we could do here? Oh, I really want to go in this direction. It's going to be a surprise to everyone else at the table. It's going to be really awesome, but like, I need you to pull it off. Similar to what you're saying with Zach. It's like, there's a certain scenario where I need both Emily and Steve to pull something off to make it really awesome at the table. And got the feedback that like Brooks and Haley loved it at my table. Like they were like, that was so cool. And to pull that off, I needed both of them in. I was on phone calls with them for hours, right? Like bringing this stuff in. But in other scenarios, I think it's completely valid to completely leave them in the dark.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Especially with like backstory tie-ins. I like to just, nope, you're never going to hear about that shit again until it like bites you in the face. But when it's one of their own creations, I think you owe it to them, because it's one of their creations, to have the conversation.
Well, yeah, it's a joint story, you know. It is. I mean, the GM is certainly directing the action, but you got to make sure that the players have some skin in the game, so to speak. You know what I mean? And you know, and Heath does a lot too, you know, and all the players do, you know, but like Zach has a particular literary mind that helps with some of that. And so to answer the question, at least from my end, I think absolutely you get the players in and focus on the players that have particular strengths for whatever thing that you're trying to adapt, you know. And there are certain things that I would go to Emily for, or that I would, you know, like to use your resources at the table. That's what I would say is GM to GM advice. You know, humble yourself enough to realize that there are other perspectives at your table that can help shape the grander story if you give a little bit of information to help make it so. And there's the things that you want to make everybody surprised with, and you just got to trust your instincts and go with it. You know what I mean? And usually those are the best and most fun things to do as a GM, but bringing some cohesiveness into it, having the players as part of it, can really help sell some of those things.
I like all that stuff. It's definitely stuff that I'm gonna take more into account as I go forward as the newest GM here in the GM Happy Hour. I think
One
that's-
thing I highly recommend is if you have a character that would know something, tell them,
yeah.
Yes.
because it's so cool to get like exposition not from you.
Oh
It-
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It makes
True.
it so much more impactful, especially on a show, but even just at a regular table, it's so cool. Like when one of the characters can literally be the like, oh, I know this, this, and this, and this, and you just have the conversation with them an hour before you start playing or whatever. Like, here's all the shit you know.
Yep. And I've been able to do something like that now, but like when I started my thing, it's like, all right, at my table we have a 17-year-old, an human, an 18-year-old elf, and a 25-year-old half orc. So it's like the backstory that they had, they didn't have this extensive backstory. Their backstory was the town that they lived in. So I was like drawing as much attention to the town and how they reacted in it as possible versus like
Well, but you
having
you
their
you
ideas.
did get your players input.
Yeah, that's what I
But
was
you
going to say.
did it
You
in
probably
real
did the most
time. You
in-depth
just-
session
yeah.
zero.
I'm,
Most of us
I'm with these
the-
guys on it. Yeah. Oh no, and even like you had
If all book one was you just like, hey, you players tell me what's going on in this world. Like that you were so giving to the players. Like
Yeah,
for
I think-
real. Like
I think the
you gave
difference-
them an entire blank like landscape with some key things that they needed to work within and then let them go, you know.
Yeah. So I guess
Positive
the
GM call
difference
out.
is I didn't talk to them as much about it up front. I just like let them have the playground when we're actually on mic. And so I was definitely I was just letting them kind of go for the most part. And
that's actually something I really appreciate about your pod, Allard. I got to call that out right now because it's fun to listen to your players in that playground, right? Like if I ran my players through Second Darkness, I would have done it differently. And our book one would have been 10 episodes shorter, without a doubt. But that's not a bad thing. I love the fact that your players got to play in that AP on mic. That was so fun to listen to. So, man, hats off to you there for sure.
I thought it was a good chance to, since they were so young, to have them. It was just like a whole book of them telling us how they would interact with the world around them. It was definitely setting up who they were, and hopefully by the end of book one, we had discovered what they wanted, and we can go forward with their whole kind of arc, I guess.
Which wraps it right back around to editing the AP for your table.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
it's like it's one of those perfect check-ins. Like I gave you a whole book to figure out what's your hook, what's your big payoff.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the Second Darkness books have been kind of just this sandbox that they throw in front of you with like events over here or a broad timeline or something like that. So it's been a lot of just kind of like waiting to change as my players make actions.
Yeah. I think that you absolutely have brought the players in to adapt Second Darkness as part of the game. You know, like as part of them playing it, it's happening in real time. And it's really, I think, a standout quality of what you're doing with your table.
I'm glad we could bring that out.
Next question. Great question, Bipolar. That was of all of your numerous inquiries, that was a good one. Moving on, we have a question from Natasha Rains. And she asked, have you made adaptations for a meme or a joke? If no, why not?
Oh man.
I have a whole character in my campaign called Seymour Wiener.
Truly.
Kobe.
Possibly the-
Truly.
Truly, it's done.
I don't know. I think that he has this golden moment in your podcast that wouldn't have been possible without any other character.
If you're ever in trouble, all you have to do is yell Wiener.
Right.
Wiener.
Yeah.
So yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think jokes make their way in for sure. I mean, like the fact that any of you know Bright is a meme made character. Or yeah, as Zach points out, the Nacondas egg farts. You know, like we made a joke, like an offhand joke, and now that's canon for that. The mist of Nacondas is sulfur smelling egg fart mist. You know,
It's about having fun, man.
yeah. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you like do that? You know, and I
Of
don't
a
know.
whole fucking Costco brand
Yeah.
called Losco that's canon in the world. Like, yeah, do that. It's so much more fun.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. If you could find that inside joke that your table just reacts to, lean into it.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, for me, on mine, it's almost easy because every time I have an NPC introduced in any of my AP's scenarios, they for whatever reason, and I don't understand why, when the writers for Extinction Curse write NPC encounters for the important NPCs to the players, for some reason they forget that the players are circus folk, right? Like
Greetings, adventurers.
yeah, seriously, like, oh, no, come cleanse my temple because you're good people and you'll do that, right?
With this important town decision.
Yes, please.
Like I'm literally dressed in clown makeup, dude.
It's
You know?
like, dude, you didn't hear my
drunk
feet flop
and-
up here? But it's fun to make those that meme, as Natasha says. It's such a perfect way to put it because sometimes that moment of laughter at the table, if when you're improving during a session, you see that perfect opportunity to insert that table meme into that situation, it's so satisfying to make everybody break out laughing. It's part of the fun, without a
The
doubt.
most satisfying moment of my GMing career was creating a emotional response to a character named Seymour Wiener.
Yeah. Like, oh,
Like,
legit.
you don't
like,
top
like
that.
tears,
I can't top that.
Tears for Seymour Wiener, you know, like it was a touching moment, you know, and
It really was.
yeah, I don't know, like of course you do that, and like that's the relationship. That's why I hope that you're playing with friends.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's why I hope you're playing with friends, because that's the true thing that makes it special, is memeing your own game. Like yes, Natasha. Yes.
Natasha, yes. Hold on. I want to know Allard. Allard, I feel like you got one coming up.
To be honest, those situations kind of fly over my head a lot of the time, and I don't know if I have any.
You do. Your entire fucking
You
first
do.
book is a goddamn meme.
Yeah, it is, man.
Like
I can't realize it. I don't have the ability to. I don't
You know what?
how.
I'm gonna positive player call out to Eli on that one then, because he assisted in that process. So
He has created
much.
the memes.
Absolutely, man. 100%.
yeah.
Also,
He's
and
working
I mean,
day in
you
and
got
day
the-
out to make memes canon. Damn it.
I don't understand. What? Name one.
Just try to pass them.
Let's see, the fuck temple, the Pesh, the killing kids,
Yeah.
the you know, like
Those are memes.
The Killer Kids.
oh, dude.
if I'm not laughing at it, I'm terrified at it, Allard. So
Yeah.
it's one or the other, you know.
I'll just keep doing what I do, and hopefully they keep popping up. I guess.
It works out, man. It works. Yeah. The
Just
fact
me
that,
being like, all right, what kind of characters are you guys gonna be, and then leaning into it. Really
well,
hard.
moving forward from here, the fact that you're oblivious to it is a meme on its own. So
Yeah,
Also-
that's now a thing I'm looking for when I'm listening.
Just him to straight face continue with the
Yeah, like,
exposition.
In most situations, I find myself.
Oh wow! All right, Natasha. Good question. You got us on that one. Good one. Commodore asked, and I feel like really only a couple of us can answer it, which might be good. Might be a shorter response time on this one. Commodore asked, so what are some older modules from previous editions that you would like to adapt to run? And so I'm assuming we're talking
Second
about
Darkness.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna adapt Second Darkness to Starfinder.
I just because there are some creature parallels there. I have a creature in one of my books that comes up in Dead Sons or something like that. There's a couple of things there. I completely lost my train of thought. What was going on?
What's going
Nailed
on?
it.
Are you adapting it to Starfinder then?
No.
Can we get that in writing?
Yes.
You know, is there anything? Is Griffin? I'm gonna reframe this question to you specifically.
Before you
and then
reframe it, can I answer?
Yeah, let's.
Well, I wanted you to
answer.
answer last because I know you've got a good.
Okay,
I
that's
know
fine.
You've got
Go
an
ahead.
answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Griffin, what 1E adventure would you like to most play in 2E? Or let me rephrase that once more. What 1E adventure, if adapted to E, would get you like all in on 2E?
The investigator as a class.
Yeah, I know.
the Inquisitor. Yes. Hell's Vengeance. Yeah, I want to play Evil in 2E.
Oh,
Give
fuck
me it.
yeah.
Give me it right away. Skulls and Shackles. I would do too. I loved.
I think that Skulls and Shackles might be a prime candidate for a 2E conversion, that it might actually do what it's trying to do better in 2E.
I think Skulls and Shackles is a prime candidate for Starfinder conversion because
dude, don't even
Starship combat.
us
You can just
excited for that.
replace the atrocious naval combat in Skulls and Shackles with an actually fleshed out system.
Let's do it, Griffin.
A commander
go.
leading the
All right, I'm in, but I played 4 books of it, so I better run it.
We're gonna adapt it and then play it. Good luck, whoever's GMing us. All right, Tyler.
Okay, all right. There was a module for AD&D when I was a kid that I read that was a huge influence on my own personal homebrew campaign, and it was called Black Flames. And Black Flames was released in a bunch of like just weird ideas for the Dark Sun campaign, which I don't want to get into right now because that's all pre-Pathfinder shit. We're all talking about like early 90s D&D shit right now. But there are some really fun AD&D adventures and modules that existed out there that will never see the light of day, that lend really heavily into modern fantasy tropes. I mean, to an extent, I'm gonna pivot this a little bit. Modern fantasy derives so much from early 90s, late 80s AD&D modules. It's not even fucking funny. There are so many tropes that exist in modern fantasy that were done 20 to 30 years ago in AD&D stuff. And I mean, between White Wolf magazine, the Kobold magazine, Dragon magazine, and all of those things that were just really, really prevalent in the early 90s, late 80s, I would love to take any of those and bring them to second edition. And I think Black Flames would be the biggest one for me.
Well, you know what, 1E, I wish I could comment on that actually, Tyler, but I have zero frame of reference of what you're talking about, other than I do recognize the Dark Sun like brand. I think I read maybe a Dark Sun book when I was a kid. You know what I mean?
Dark Sun was really it was a big early fantasy world, and it helped develop a lot of modern fantasy tropes, for sure.
You know what I think might be interesting is running a Starfinder campaign that's like the other side of Iron Gods, like running Iron Gods from the Starfinder side of it. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
adapting what you can from that AP, but writing it from as if maybe you're on the ship that crashes there, right? You know what I mean? Like a Starfinder crew lives on that crash, you know.
Okay.
Or,
That's
like,
I think that could be
interesting.
fun.
Or
You know?
down the line, a Starfinder crew comes back to like
Oh, to salvage
crash.
it, right? Yeah, to find it. Yeah, that would be actually better. I
Boy,
think.
that's
Sorry, the
interesting.
gap happened, and so that could,
Oh.
was never possible.
Sorry, sorry.
Griffin, we're talking
Good luck.
about adapting. So
Never
Speaking
happened.
of adaptations, I really want somebody to run me through Strange Aeons, but with the Call of Cthulhu system.
Oh fuck, that would be so cool.
Yep.
Oh
Yep.
man.
Fantasy Call of Cthulhu.
Seriously,
Get
okay,
it.
Strange
Wow.
Aeons is Paizo's Call of Cthulhu AP without a doubt.
Exactly. And I
Without a
really
doubt.
love the system Call of Cthulhu. I would love to kind of take that from like it's not modern obviously, but from a like Lovecraftian era back to like fantasy.
Yeah, yeah. No, and the thing about Call of Cthulhu is that depending on the table you're playing with, it's funny. My table would probably work the best with Call of Cthulhu because of how much danger I impose on my table. But Call of Cthulhu on its own doesn't make your player characters feel like heroes. It makes them feel like floundering, like they're floundering people in this thing that's too big for them to ever understand. And if you've entered combat, it's too late. You're already dead.
Yeah, I think the thing that would give all of the Pathfinder Cthulhu shit the punch it needs is just playing it with the Call of Cthulhu system.
Fuck yeah.
It's the tabletop system, like, and I see it happening in the chat. Same thing with Signal of Screams. It's like this, and same thing with Carrion Crown. It's like there's this stuff that tries to hit the Lovecraftian mythos stuff, and it does a pretty damn good job, to Paizo's credit, working in its own system. But like when you impose a system where like the heroes are not heroes and real bad shit happens all the time, that's what actually gives you the horror that's meant to impose. That's something Adam and I have talked about a lot, like something that's very difficult to bring to either a Pathfinder or Starfinder setting, is that true feeling of horror, because you're
characters
running
are
running a
strong.
table of heroes.
yeah, like it's like
Yeah.
you got superheroes against horror. You know, it's tough. Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard of the game? I think it's called 10 Candles.
Well, I love 10 Candles.
Okay, I just
Don't get me
just
started on
ordered-
10 Candles. I
just
love the
ordered
premise of
it
that.
in order to like get a game that kind of would help me think about how to create that kind of like impending doom kind of feeling.
The thing about 10 Candles is everybody has to go into it with the agreement that like my character will be dead.
Mhm.
Like my character will die by the end of this session. That's
Yeah.
that's the agreement you go into when you play it. But it's such a good cooperative storytelling device when you have these moments in the system where like everybody creates things that are true about the world. So
Right.
it's like you go around the table and it's like the person that's running it can say something horrible, but you can say, like I could say, oh, you're being chased by a pack of wolves, and then Allard could say, but we have shotguns. Like that's how you can kind of
Cool. I can't wait to play. I can't wait to.
it's very fun.
Cool.
Okay. Next question. We 10 lawn gnomes from the kind of the HLP area ask, have you used any story feats?
I haven't.
That's a 1E
not.
specific thing.
It's a 1E
Yeah.
specific thing. Eric is asking this. He ran us through a little bit of Iron Fang Invasion and had us pick them. But I will say what I do instead of story feats is I do provide extra feats that have to tie into your character, and even further into the campaign, I provided even more additional feats that are tying into like where your character is headed now. So while they're not strictly story feats, which in this context are kind of like a feat that has a benefit, and then when you reach a certain point in your story arc, you get an additional benefit. So you might have like a mortal enemy or something, and you first of all you start with a benefit, but then when you kill your enemy at some point in the story, you get an additional benefit from the feat. They're really cool, but I haven't used them as a GM. I've obviously used them as a player in something he's run.
I've definitely like read them and thought about them, and like even just like having them in mind, and or the ideas of them in mind, and even that with like archetypes and different archetype kind of flavors and stuff too. Just like have those kind of ideas and rules in the back of your head, just in case you can like impose a little bit more flavor into what your characters end up like choosing for themselves. If they maybe back into something that's a little sketchier, you have this like little boon or negative thing that could happen to them.
Absolutely. I think they're a great storytelling device, especially if you have players that maybe haven't fleshed their backstory out as much. It's like, oh, take one of these. It's a mechanical benefit for you to have a better backstory for me to then incorporate into the AP.
All right. Well, next question. This one comes from Commodore again. It's an interesting question, a little off topic, but I like it. What novel, comic, or Norse saga that's oddly specific, Commodore, would you want to run? So is there an IP that's not currently framed as a TTRPG that you would like to adapt as one? I got an answer. I would love to play a fucking Stormlight Archive RPG. 100%. I'd be down for that. I'd be definitely down for that.
I think Stormlight and Adam, I have to give you credit for bringing me in on this one as much as you have. There is a solid rules system behind that particular novel, or that series, that fantasy series, that could, in reality, be put into a TTRPG rule set that would be very interesting to run.
Is that the series in your little book club right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mimax
cool.
Book Club.
I haven't read any of those guys' books, but I'm pretty sure it's him that did this kind of like YouTube series, and he had talked about just like soft to hard magic systems. And
get me started about soft and hard magic systems.
Don't get him hard magic system. Do not get him hard magic system.
It kind of made sense that his books would have this feeling that they could be adapted into something. That
now, and I actually have a moment of very early on in my reading of the Stormlight Archives, I was like, this is the softest magic system I've ever
I was
encountered.
laughing when you said that shit. I was like, okay.
This is so soft.
Keep reading.
Oh, just bring this shit in when it's convenient for the protagonist to do amazing things. But no. If Adam would have pointed me to Ars Arcanum at the glossary of the book, where it specifically called out the different like glyphs.
Listen, man, you had the book in your hands, dude. Like,
you're right. You're right. That's fair.
You had the soft magic in your hands, and you made it a hard magic system.
No, and you know it's funny because there are two very clear magic systems in any fantasy novel that you've ever read, and there's soft magic and hard magic. Hard magic, or Venetian casting, or Venetian magic, is very typically has rules laid out somewhere, and D&D 3.5.4 5th edition, Pathfinder 1st edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition has a Venetian casting system where you have levels of magic that you can cast, and you can adapt spells that you have to those casting levels, and that's very typical of what we understand to be magic systems as tabletop RPG players. But there are non-Venetian systems that are more esoteric or more free-flowing in nature, like Mage. If anybody has ever played Mage, it's a D10 system that's set in modern times. and I don't want to dive into it too much, but
I will.
am I about to? Here I am.
I saw the gleam in his
Want to
eyes.
go into it?
Okay,
We can
now,
let you go.
all right. Here's what I love
Go ahead,
about
folks.
Here's what I love about Mage. Just real quick side note: Mage, as a TTRPG system, magic exists in a way that you can make magical things happen, but if you can explain them in scientific ways, it's more real. So no matter how fantastical, no matter how crazy the spell that you cast is, if I cast a fireball at you, if I can scientifically explain it in a way that, oh no, I just created a leaking gas line that exploded at the moment that I cast this fireball. That's a non-Venetian system.
Or like you were in this puddle of water and I just kind of maybe severed an electrical line and it fell into
Absolutely, yes, and that's your electric arc that occurs, and there are things that happen in these non-Venetian systems that are very, very what's the word I'm looking for?
So if you were to
Jazz
adapt,
hands.
if you were to adapt
Jazz
Mage,
hands.
you would adapt it as a Venetian spell system.
Well,
Trying to get you back on track here.
And I appreciate that because I'm kind of drunk and I'm rambling at this point.
Well, it's GM happy hour after all.
Here we are.
And it's about to be GM last call.
Yeah.
It's getting there. It's one of those things where if you have hard rules to your magic system, it's easily adaptable to TTRPG.
What was that?
TTRPG.
I think he added an L, which would make it live. We
Live.
just
Yeah, there you go.
LARPing.
tabletop live action RPG. We've actually done that on the with the HLP crew. Talk to me after class.
Right.
Oh,
A soft system has the tendency to introduce magical elements when the protagonist needs it to be introduced. And that was one thing that I thought Stormlight Archive was. And I'm bringing it back to what Adam originally brought me in on. That's what I thought Stormlight Archive was a soft magic system that introduced magic when it was needed. But I found there was a very hard system to it, and I think it would be very applicable to a TTRPG.
I didn't think
You
real
made it.
life was a soft magic system.
Thank you.
But the fact that you brought that all around just when you needed it means that life must be a soft magic system.
Life is a soft magic system.
Next question.
Oh, wait, I have something for this
Okay,
one.
go for it. Go for it, Griffin.
Eric
Sorry.
called it out. Digimon or any other monster catching RPG, I want to bring to tabletop. I want to do all the stats for all of the monsters. And on top of that, I also want a survival horror TTRPG system based off of the Max Brooks Zombie World War Z book
shit.
with the
Nice.
Zombie Survival Guide, his book, The Zombie Survival Guide, as the player's handbook.
Oh, that would
Bada
be
bing.
fun.
You can
That'd
pay
be
me later, Max Brooks. Got it. Bam.
All right. Allard, did you have anything?
What was the question?
Yeah. All right. Next question. The welfare store asks, have you ever changed an AP so much that it no longer had any semblance to the original AP? And second, do you have any changes that you regret making? So we'll start with the first question. Have you ever changed an AP so much that it's no longer the AP? And I will bring this down to book level.
I have not yet.
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, I made extensive
You wouldn't say book
changes.
3?
No, because
Ooh.
the heart of book 3 is still there.
Yeah. Okay.
Like the heart of book 3 and what book 3 is supposed to be, which is supposed to be a, investigation, an escalation, and then a final town-wide combat. Yes, that all exists. It's far different in my rendition of it, but it all
Yeah, the
exists.
specifics are different, but
And the enemies are like, somewhat changed, but somewhat the same. So I'd say no. Like, if you listen to my rendition of book 3 of Carrying Crown, you're still gonna, and you have played it, you're still gonna get the like, okay, well, I see exactly what he changed, but I also
still
can
the
follow
arc.
this A to B.
yeah. yes, kind of similar over arc, I guess, you know. All right, good deal. Tyler, have you ever changed something so much it's no longer the AP?
No, I haven't. If I'm
Yeah,
running an AP, I'm running the AP. I'm going to keep it on track. If I'm running
Yeah,
homebrew, I'm running homebrew.
I wouldn't say that I've changed it. I, all I've ever done is added to it. You know what I mean? Like, and not even so much with what's on the pod, but like with when we did Storm King's Thunder and 5e, I added a lot to that, like a whole other story arc that had to, like, it was like a mini adventure implanted onto the main adventure, but we still did the main adventure. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that there was this whole other thing that was kind of amended to it, you know.
The party just signed up for that buy one adventure, get half an adventure free, baby.
Well, they didn't, but that's what they got.
Well, that's what they got. So you just shoved it down their throat then, I guess.
Okay. Well, so the second part of that question, have you guys made any changes that you regret making?
Yes.
It's a hard question to answer, Welfare Store. Just gonna throw that out there. You just say yes. That's like pretty much all you can say about it.
I mean, if you want me to divulge, I will. I have a.
So it's about a soft magic system.
It's
first.
about.
Sorry, I had to.
No, that's fair. That's fair. GM call out. No, I introduced mythic levels into Rise of the Rune Lords, and it was the worst idea I ever had. But in regards to something more specific to the AP itself, in Return of the Rune Lords was an AP that I ran for my table before it was the 4 that are in the pod. I made adjustments for a player that wanted to be the front of everything. I made adjustments to the person who wanted to be the protagonist to the AP, and I followed what he wanted. And it turned into something that the rest of the table disliked. And I don't know if this is where this question was going at all.
No, I think that's.
I think that's super
an
valid.
actual legit answer. So you're doing good.
It's one of those things where if you focus too much on the person who is trying their best to be in the spotlight, you will leave the rest of your table behind. And leaving the rest of your table behind for one person at your table is the worst possible thing that you can do. Whether it's AP or homebrew or whatever it is. Sometimes you need to pull back from the wants of one particular person because they're so big and they're so loud and they're so obvious of what they want. You still have to bring everybody at the table into it. And I fed into this player at one point, and it made my table fall apart.
You learned a lesson.
I learned a lesson.
I will say a regret that I had is kind of almost opposite to that, to where I was blinded by my own ambition. And, you know, we were running Tomb of Annihilation, and I was actually running this is a 5e module, and I was running 2 different groups through the same module existing in the same universe, that they were racing to the tomb to see who could get there first. There was the evil party and there was a good party, and they were racing to the tomb to see who could get there first, you know, and who could get the MacGuffin first. And it was a cool idea, and like we were doing it, and it worked for a while until it got to the point to where we joined up. Like it was like, okay, they're at this city that the tomb is in, and they have to meet each other at this point. And we had one of the best sessions of that game we had. We had like 2 joint sessions back to back where I had 9 players a party of 5 and a party of 4 working from opposite ends of a dungeon towards each other to the middle of the dungeon where the boss fight was. You know what I mean? And that they would kind of come together and meet each other. And then I had this, and so everything's like going great. That was a great session. Awesome. But then the reality of the storylines came into play. And it was like, well, this character would actually go with this group now, and this character would go with this group. And so then the players got switched, which I was like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to shuffle up the parties, and we're going to have the characters interacting with different, well, the real life issues fucked that to pieces because like, it's hard enough to get 5 people to schedule to do the same thing. It's really hard to shift up 9 people who had scheduled. It's like, oh, now you're playing on Sundays and you're playing on Thursdays. How's that working? It didn't. And so we actually ended up not finishing either one of those Tomb of Annihilation games because the real world and my over ambition and thinking that I was doing something like really cool blinded me to the facts of the reality of like, hey, we're human beings with schedules and lives outside of this, you know. And like I got too excited about it and we ended up shutting that game down.
And doesn't real life suck?
Yeah.
I mean,
You're a real Icarus GM.
yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah. I've tried that before, Adam, and it never goes. It goes exactly the way you just described. Things never line up. You can never get those 2 parties to be in the same page, and things just fail. It's unfortunate.
And it's also like one where you're destined to fail it. So there wasn't like a lot of extreme motivation from the players to like make it happen because they all knew that they were marching to their inevitable death, you know. So it just kind of fell apart, man. But it could have been something cool. Like I had this ambition that we were going to do the final dungeon. I was going to create, like we were going to get together in person because we played it all remote, but we were like going to get together in person, like one long weekend, you know, play like 3 days of marathoning the final dungeon, you know, and we were going to do it in person with like in-person maps and tokens and shit like that. And, you know, that shit never fucking happened, man.
That's unfortunate. 'Cause it sounds awesome when you talk about it.
Such a great,
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
things have a
Wait, Allard, do you regret anything? Because I certainly don't.
I
Shut up, Griff.
off the top of my head, it's only when things that I've just like kind of come up with off the top of my head or like are homebrew elements where my character's like, wait, are these guys still around town and would they help us? These characters that you introduced as flavor like level 9 characters just so they could look cool in front of you, are they still around town and would they still like us, right? But no, that's just when my players want to far reach upon the ideas that I've put out for flavor is when it kind of starts to bite me in the butt.
Sorry, guys. They're at a wedding this weekend.
Yeah, they left town immediately. They're gone. They're no longer here. But it hasn't been like bad or hindering as of yet. But I've only played with friends that I've had for the last 6 years or so. And we have this kind of, I don't know, this relationship where we're coming together to do this and we're all kind of committed to what happens and not what.
Yeah. My only regrets like tweaking stuff was as an early GM tweaking stuff where I, for the sake of fun, overpowered my players, and then I did not have the GMing skills to balance that with against the as written adventure. That's my biggest regret in the past. I mean, I think now you can tell I'm clearly overpowering my players and just rolling with that shit. So
Yeah.
now I love it. I love it. It makes you feel strong.
I've definitely fallen that path a little bit where like for fun I'm giving them a little bit extra stuff.
A little extra wealth,
Now
little extra abilities.
Yep. I have to figure out how to balance that to actually make the written encounters challenging. So
A little extra actual
have to
demon
adapt
encounters.
because of how I've thought fun goes, I guess.
All right. We got time for 2 more questions. Okay.
Are we
Yeah.
tracking time still?
Yeah, well, we've got 2 more questions left,
All right,
Tyler.
that'll
so
work.
either way, that's what we have time for. So,
Sorry, last question. Cut for time.
a
so the first one, I think I just want like a short, direct answer from each of you. What's the biggest thing you got? Like, I don't want any explanation. Just tell me.
Okay.
What's the biggest thing? This comes from Sir Newt.
Sir Newt.
What's the biggest thing you guys have removed from a game?
A whole base.
A whole base. Great job, Allard. Killed it. Nailed it. Griff.
Whole base?
Yeah.
The whole intent of half of an AP.
Beautiful. Tyler,
Fuck. Like
come on.
I got nothing. I stick more to the books than these two guys do. I've removed like 4 encounters in a row to make way for character story, but
Yeah, I mean that's what I was going to say, Tyler. I removed an entire string of encounters that I felt were unimportant and didn't matter, like half of a part. You know.
Yeah. I removed a whole location.
the whole location?
Yeah, because of my players' choices.
Really?
They left me with no choice.
Wow.
My player's choices left me with no choice.
That's right.
Famous GM words.
Couldn't do anything else.
Fortunately, I had to do
Yeah,
something.
you've given me no choice, players. I had to do this. Your
No,
choices.
go there.
It was your choices.
Like I
Sorry, Varisha.
I
It's
mean,
gone now.
Allard, we're gonna have a conversation after GM Happy Hour about this because I'm super fucking curious, man.
You need to listen to more of our episodes.
I am behind.
I know. I'm behind on everyone, so that's fine.
Last question. Last call, as it were. This one goes to 10 Lawn Gnomes. Again, what do you do with threads built on the foundations of PCs that are no longer alive or otherwise influencing the stories? Adapted loose threads is kind of the general idea of this question. Allard, how do you feel about starting this one off?
Feel all right with it.
All right.
I guess my example is when those threads are gone from the main story. It can still be fun to touch on what you think has happened with those threads as time has developed. Or you can remind your players the impact that they feel about not being able to follow those threads through. There's always kind of a psychological thing when you know something was set up to happen, but you never felt what happened. If you remind your players of that, it can have an impact on their characters because they all of a sudden have a loss. They have a loss of a realization or a loss of an anticipated moment. And that can then inform other decisions that they have. They no longer will hesitate if that means that they will feel the loss of a potential moment again. It's kind of playing with the psychology of it, I guess.
Well, and I also don't think that a thread ending means it doesn't have impact, or a loose thread means it doesn't have impact. Well, a thing not happening has impact on a story. You know what I mean? Like, and what does it mean that this particular backstory didn't get revealed? Is there something that you can dig into there that allows you to add a new mystery to the story? And it, is there a way to bring it back? And if there's not, that's okay too. It's still informing the story. It's still characterized whichever PC that it was relevant to. It still informed the decisions that they made as a player and how they went about what they were choosing to do. you know, and I think that it's almost good to have some loose threads left, because you don't have to answer everything that makes who you are. You know, that's not how life works. You know, there are things that have happened in my life that don't have any like present relevance other than how they affected me at the time that they happened, you know, and how that informed my perspective. You know, like I moved 8 times in my youth before I graduated high school. You know, like there are friendships that I had that I'll probably never reconnect with, and I have no idea what that person is doing right now and how their life turned out. But that doesn't mean that that friendship didn't have an impact on who I am now and the decisions that I'm making. And it's no different with a backstory. If maybe you don't get to it in the game, you still created that personality for that person, and that's informing the decisions you're making as a character.
I like that. I do. And
Yeah.
I think even like definitely the loose threads can make up the cloth that was behind you. And I think it's even cooler when you can realize that there is a loose thread as a GM, and maybe with time that thread can be reincorporated back into the cloth that you were kind of weaving in general. Loose threads are just kind of time bombs in a way.
I agree with Allard to an extent. I mean, loose threads are almost a tool that you have as a GM. It's a tool that you can use to bring the party back to a moment where your table had a moment of grief, right? So one of the rules that I have at my own table, when somebody dies and a new character is introduced, I would really like for the new characters to have some sort of tie-in to the characters that died in some way. And being able to pull a story thread back into the AP in some way that is, if you're lucky, ties into the AP itself, and you pull that thread right at the correct moment, where maybe a character who died had a major impact in the AP itself, in books that, you know, books 3, 4, 5, or whatever the case may be, on something that is happening currently. And I think, Adam, I'm gonna kind of touch on you with this. There was a couple of deaths that happened.
Touch on me, Tyler.
There was a couple of deaths that happened at the end of against the Aeon Throne that really tugged on early implications that occurred. And I think that without telling Allard how to do things, there are things that are currently happening in your AP that tug on previous actions that have occurred in book 1 of your AP. And you can tug on those threads with new characters and with new MP3s, with new
MP3s.
MP3s. I said
I'm about to get my Zune out.
NPCs.
All about them wave files.
Thank you. That can call back to early parts of the campaign. And just because a character is dead doesn't mean that character's influence on the campaign stops.
Yeah. It's really sad when you get to a point where the party realizes that we can't do this task anymore because that person that always did this task for us is no longer here. And I don't know. I feel like those points are really they're really impactful for like emotional story beats, or just
you almost want to have those moments where you're like, man, I wish this character was here right now. They could help us out so much. You know, like,
I mean, the thing is, you're God. This is a magical setting. You can do whatever the fuck you want to tie that back in. as much as we're saying all of this stuff, I'll give you a grand example from my show. A letter is introduced. We are 114 episodes in. A letter was introduced in episode 2. That letter did not get reintroduced until episode 75, following the death of a character that it was about. And it didn't get read until episode 100, where it became relevant to the following book.
Fucking
Have
pull those
contingency
threads.
plans. Have contingency plans. Pull the threads. You have the threads. Pull the threads. If you plant the seeds, you can harvest, but you got to plant the seeds.
Mhm.
But you're God in this setting as the GM. So if a character was that integral to one of your books, your big bad is probably a level 18 character. You can bring them back in some circumstance. You can pull other threads. You can do so many things with the magic in the setting to facilitate that thread not dying. There's no circumstance in which you have to let it die. And so if it was that important to the story that you were trying to build, it's very easy to keep it alive, is all I'll say, because I think you guys have done a great job of saying how the continuity of threads and everything is important.
Well, that's last call, gents. So, Allard,
Yeah, what?
you were DD. You're supposed to drive us home.
All right, vroom vroom, everybody here. Thanks for showing up and listening to another episode of the GM Happy Hours, where us four get together, get a little drunk, and talk to you about the hobbies that we enjoy. The hobby in particular being TTRPGs of Pathfinder in specific, but we've touched on a couple.
And Starfighter.
Starfinder.
Excuse me.
Starfinder.
Let's I'll take that back.
Oh,
I
actually-
I meant to say Paizo, not Pathfinder.
Got it.
My bad.
All right.
Paizo products, but we have touched on a couple extras today, and in just like informing how we can adapt what we're doing to better suit the AP we're running and the table that we are running it for. So with that in mind, everybody raise your glasses, finish them off if you haven't already, and give a big toast to changing your APs for the good of everybody.
Here, here.
Hair.
We'll see you next time.
Finish your drinks. We'll see you. in a
We'll
month.
see you.
We'll see ya.
That's still the best sign off. I don't know.